What's going on, guys? Sam here for Balanced Entertainment, and today I've got another installment in my series on modern VFX, and if you haven't seen the previous two episodes, be sure to check them out at the link below. So I've spent a good portion of this series kind of sounding like an old man, criticizing all the new movies coming out, and talking about the, good old days when VFX were better. But as I said at the end of the last video, I now want to talk about the other side of the coin. So in this episode, I want to focus on modern filmmakers and films that use VFX extremely well and maximize the technology they have available to them in order to create something unique and visually compelling while also maintaining realism. So the first example I'd like to talk about is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now, this film was pretty low budget for its scope and scale, and the VFX team and the directors had some really interesting ideas to bring their visions to life. So take the multiverse jumping shots, for example. Some of these shots were actually done with entirely practical effects. So the shot of the main character flying backwards in her office chair was done by putting her in a wheelbarrow or something that could move easily, turning the camera's shutter speed and frame rate way down, and pushing her backwards on the wheelbarrow. Some wind was then added via a leaf blower behind her, and the actress was told to act in slow motion so that it would appear the movement was happening at a normal speed. When the frames were played back at 24 frames per second, because they took fewer frames and had longer exposure times, the resulting shot had the proper amount of motion blur and is sped up. This creates a much more convincing shot, and since she is actually in the real environment, the lighting on her face and body is totally accurate. So this is one example of how you can use your knowledge of cameras in creative ways to get very interesting looking and convincing shots that make people scratch their heads and wonder, how did they do that? A great resource for ideas like this is old movies. Remember when movies used to use rear projection for car shots? This was the technique where they would take footage of a road from different angles and project it on screens behind a car inside of a studio to give the appearance of the actors driving. Well, that old technique is actually coming back, but as technology often does, it's coming back in a different way. What I'm referring to is virtual production. So many of you may have heard of virtual production because of the popular Disney show The Mandalorian or The Jungle Book, which was also created by the same person, Jon Favreau. And these projects were kind of some of the pioneers of this technique. So what is virtual production? Well, essentially virtual production is a way of doing your VFX in camera. So instead of shooting on a green screen and then compositing your environment and other assets into your shot after the fact, the idea behind virtual production is to get it all done in camera and have to add minimal VFX in post. So how it works is, first there's a wall or room of modular LED panels set up called an LED volume. This can range from a single wall or screen to a full-on giant room with 360-degree LED walls and even a ceiling. There's a system of trackers set up around the studio and one set up on the camera. These trackers are calibrated to the space, and then they're able to track the position and motion of the camera within the studio at all times. A computer system is then hooked up to the LED volume, which is also connected to the camera position trackers. The tracking data is fed from the trackers into the computer and then into a real-time 3D environment generator. In many cases, this is a game engine called Unreal Engine. Game engines are optimal for use in situations like these because you can render scenes in real time, which I'll explain the importance of in a moment. So with the tracking data being inputted into the 3D environment, a 3D virtual camera is then created, which now moves within the 3D environment exactly as your real camera moves. When the focal length, sensor size, and other specs are inputted into the 3D virtual camera to match the real camera you're using, you can now move the camera anywhere within the LED volume, and the system can track and project the proper environment on the screens around you. This solves the biggest limitation of environment projection, which is the lack of ability to move the camera. In the olden days, you couldn't really move the camera around because you had your shot captured from one particular angle and projected on a screen. With this system, you can move the camera around in the environment and it'll properly calculate the appropriate parallax and display it in your projected environment. The other big deal with virtual production is that it also provides fully immersive lighting and environment all around the actors. So not only is this helpful for the actors to be able to use as a reference since they can see the environment they're acting in, but it's also helpful for capturing things like reflections and properly matched ambient lighting, which can be very difficult to match when shooting on a green screen. So if you want to see more about virtual production, leave a comment and let me know. And while we're on the topic of Unreal Engine, if you guys are interested in learning about the program, it's free and it's an amazing tool for filmmakers, whether you're using it for pre-visualization, lighting concepts, or my primary use for it, which is visual effects and post-production. If you want to learn more about how to use this amazing free software, check out the courses I have created linked below. I have a free beginner course that'll teach you everything you need to know about Unreal Engine as a beginner. And then I also have a subsequent over 8.5-hour course that shows you how to create the scenes that you're seeing now. So if you guys are interested, head over to my website, boundless-resource.com, and check those out now. If you're a beginner, I highly recommend you sign up for the free course, no strings attached. And if you feel comfortable, I recommend moving up to those other courses and really expanding your tool set as a VFX artist or filmmaker. I've also started up a membership program on the website where I'll be releasing exclusive, extended content not available anywhere else. So back to the main part of this video, virtual production sounds great and all, but it's way out of the budget for the average person. So how can you implement these techniques in your own films on a budget? So going back to our case study for this video, Everything Everywhere All at Once, if we take a look at some of the other multiverse jump shots that they created, they couldn't be done practically and required some VFX, but they could implement practical shooting techniques in conjunction with the concepts of virtual production to achieve the look that they wanted. So the way that they did this is the shots were taken on a green screen. But before they shot the scene, one of the directors had gathered what essentially amounted to hyperlapse footage. So it was shot at a low shutter speed on a gimbal, which he collected while walking through random places that he wanted the main character to warp through. So when it came time to shoot the scene, instead of just using a normal green screen setup, they also placed 2 LED screens, one on either side of the actress, to cast environmental lighting on her. So if you wanted to do this, you could use TVs or even projection screens potentially, or even just shoot the projector directly on your subject depending on the look that you're going for. So these LED screens played back the footage shot by the director as he walked through various locations, which then also were used as the background when they replaced the green screen. So with the addition of some extra VFX elements like glass breaking as she went through windows, etc., the shot was fairly easily pieced together and made much more convincing by the dynamic lighting that was added by those 2 LED screens. So if you're unable to shoot in a real environment, this is a great way to add realistic, interactive lighting to your subject for cheap, and it makes a world of difference. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways to enhance the realism of your VFX shots, which can be learned from good, resourceful directors like Kwan and Scheenert. Study the shots that make you wonder, how did they pull that off? Because those are the ones that will teach you to be resourceful, efficient, and solve your most difficult shots in the best way possible. So in the next episode, I'd like to talk about some big directors like Chris Nolan and Denis Villeneuve, and how they implement several useful techniques to achieve maximum realism in their VFX shots. So stay tuned for that. So that's about all the time I have for today's episode. Thank you guys for joining me for this, and I hope you learned something. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I find these concepts really interesting, and I'm glad that you guys seem to be interested in these topics as well. If you want to keep seeing these videos, be sure to leave a comment and also like the video. And don't forget to check out those courses over at boundless-resource.com. So thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.